do you have your own myth, a new myth that you tell yourself about how your days string together into a meaningful life?
And the reason why I feel like I'm not too interested in that is because I don't really believe in meta-narrative at all.
I would wake up in the morning and I didn't have a reason to put my foot on the floor.
Okay, this is the easy answer. It's like, when you take out the trash, do you go looking for new trash? No.
No,
No.
but you instinctively or naturally create more trash. I don't like not having a meta narrative.
A lot of people shed God, but they still hold on to like the idea that you need a telos, and I just think that's kind of small-minded.
All right, so as always, we are back, and you are checking out the Ichabod podcast. All three of us, these are former Christians coming together to talk about their former faith. And each of us had experiences where we looked back at what we thought was the Word of God and were able to say, man, that thing used to be glorious to me, but the glory has departed. Um, Seeing it from the standpoint of ancient Near Eastern myth, seeing what we now know about our world, we look and we just say, man, I can't call that truth. I can't call that divine. Um, I can't call it glorious. And so we kind of embrace that idea of Ichabod, but this is the Ichabod. And so, of course, you have myself. We have my man Jay Witt, short for Jehovah's Witness Protection. And we have Albert Kim out on the West Coast. Fellas, say what's up.
How's it going?
Yeah, it's good. It's good to be back. It's good to be gathered with the brothers.
How, behold how good it is when brothers are all together in unity.
The oil down Aaron's beard.
um, it's weird. Somebody said to me on Facebook, like, they said, imagine breaking up with someone and then you spend the rest of your life talking about them every chance you get and claim you're over them. And they were trying to use that as evidence that I'm not over God, that I'm still fixated on God. And I had several responses, but part of it, you spend 30 years learning to interpret your entire world through the lenses of the Bible and run every thought past the idea of a God and then cease to believe in that God. You don't automatically, the trajectory of your entire thought life doesn't automatically shift. You are still learning and unlearning how to detach your thoughts from that God. And so if you hear us, kind of instinctively go to biblical references, it's not a sign that, see, they still believe, or see, God still has his hand on them, or see, it's a sign of the conditioning that we've been through for 30 years. So this, as we said in one of our earlier podcasts, these jokes and these biblical references sometimes, they're part of the detoxification, um, the detox program that we're in, as it were. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on on that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we're in the year 2022. What's that a reference to?
Hmm.
So it's like, for anybody who would say, "Oh, you can't stop," we can't even fill out the year on our license or something without some sort of reference to this Christianized world that we live in. So, I mean,
Hmm.
for anybody who would say, "Oh, you're obsessing," well, this has been imposed on us.
Hmm.
On some level, we live a lot of the idioms. Apple of my eye. A lot of the idioms within the English language are derivative from or derived from the King James version of the Bible.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
many of these idioms we find ourselves using and not even realizing that we're using them.
There was a period of time where I really didn't think about it a whole lot.
Hmm.
So, for me, in some cases, I've really forgotten a lot about. Like I don't have verses memorized the way I
Hmm.
used to. Things like that. So there was a purging that happened in my mind
Hmm.
or in my history. But at the same time, yes, there's habits of thought. There's things that just won't ever really go away in some sense. But
Hmm.
we do the best we can to process that and
Yeah.
understand that. So
It's almost like
yeah.
when you say things that will almost probably never go away. There are certain things that think about language. When people speak different languages, try to get someone of a certain dialect to pronounce the English TH. They won't be able to because their lips never got used to forming those kind of words in the formative years of their life. But they did get used to forming other phonetic sounds. But it was in the formative years. And so you're going to pronounce things a certain way. You're going to process things a certain way because of what happened to you in your formative years. Well, in the same way, if you're Christianized, if you're inducted into any religion, you're going to process things a certain way. And so even when you come out of that, when you're in a different social or cultural setting, it's going to be hard to fix your metaphorical mouth to say certain things a certain way because of how you've been used to saying them. So that's sort of what you're seeing. Maybe give a little bit of grace when you see that in somebody else. Don't just immediately try to take it and claim it as a victory for, see, our gods still got him. No, this is it's an escape attempt that you're watching.
Right. Exactly.
So, but yeah, so tonight we're back at it. We're going to actually talk about something that is very, I just think it's an interesting topic. I've spoken with Jay Witt about this several times. Even when I had Derek Lambert from Myth Vision on, I probed him about this. We're going to talk about this idea of myth and myth making. Myth making as a way to make meaning in one's life. And so I want to introduce this by playing a clip from a video. I don't know who this man is. I know one of the people in this clip is Lawrence Krauss, is Lawrence Krauss the astrophysicist or
astrophysicist? Yeah, theoretical physicist. Yeah.
So theoretical physicist. You'll see him in the screen off to the left. It looks like this might have been a debate or something like that. I don't know. But the guy who's at the podium, he's going to introduce this idea of how mankind got into the habit of myth making. He's not going to use those words, but as he speaks, you'll see how it'll tie in. But then I want to come back and kind of spark up a conversation between the three of us. So Albert, if you can play that first clip, and then we'll talk about it.
To start off with a thought experiment, imagine you're a hominid on the plains of Africa 3.5 million years ago. You're a tiny little Australopithecine afarensis, little brain. Your name is Lucy. And you hear a rustle in the grass. Is it a dangerous predator or is it just the wind? If you think that the rustle in the grass is a dangerous predator and it turns out it's just the wind, you've made a type 1 error in cognition. You've a false positive. You thought the wind was connected to something and it wasn't. A was connected to B and it wasn't. So that's a false positive, but that's relatively harmless. But if you think that the rustle in the grass is just the wind and it turns out it's a dangerous predator, you're lunch. Congratulations, you've just been given a Darwin Award for taking yourself out of the gene pool early before reproducing. And we are the descendants of those who are most likely to make type 1 errors, false positives, versus type 2 errors, false negatives. That is to say, why can't you just stay in the grass and collect enough data to get the answer right? And the answer is that predators don't wait around for prey animals to collect more data. That's why they stalk and sneak up on their prey animals, so they can't get enough data. So we evolved the propensity to make snap decisions and make one kind of error more likely than another kind of error. And that kind of error, that false positive, that's superstition. That's magical thinking. That's assuming A is connected to B. It's a true pattern and it isn't, and you're wrong. That's the basis of finding false patterns like gods. Now, what's the difference between the wind and a dangerous predator? The wind is an inanimate force. A dangerous predator is an intentional agent. And his intention is to eat me, and that can't be good. So what we also do, in addition to finding these meaningful patterns, is infuse in them agency. That is, it's alive, it's real, it has intention, and its intention is not good, so I better assume it's real. And this is the basis of animism and spiritism and polytheism and monotheism and the belief in angels and aliens and demons and spirits and poltergeists and gods. Gods are invisible agents who run the world, who control things, who create these patterns, who are these patterns that we use to explain things. All cultures everywhere in the world have created God beliefs. Gods with these that are intentional agents.
I love the way he put that, and I will probably use that in several other spaces because I think it's a pithy way to say what I've been taking a long time to say. But first of all, I just want to hear if you guys have any reactions or thoughts, responses to that before I begin to try to tie it in to what we're going to be talking about.
I'll say a tentative, I agree. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I only say that because, you know, what he's doing, he's trying to offer an explanation, you know, a plausible one. Mm-hmm. It sounds extremely plausible, but I think, once again, it's like, you know, I always, in some sense, take some of these evolutionary explanations with some kind of grain of, you know, mm-hmm. The grain of salt. But, you know, it's plausible enough for me right now, and therefore tentative. Yeah.
Gotcha. Jay Witt.
I'm guessing he's looking at the prevalence of these beliefs and the guess is based on his, you know, more or less enumeration of this fact that he's saying that, okay, you have cultures, every society has, you know, some sort of version of this. So therefore it's something that it's inveterate to human beings being this way.
It must have been something that humanity found beneficial for it to be so widespread.
And that's why he's trying to come up with a scientific answer for why, you know, gods are so prevalent. And so, I mean, you know, there has to be a reason. You don't have that kind of uniformity, and there isn't a reason. You know, so,
well, one reason somebody could say is, well, because God revealed himself. But then you'd have to assume that God revealed himself differently to all these different people.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I love when he talked about false positives and false negatives, right? If you're this ancient being and you hear this rustle behind hominid,
he said something,
yeah. You hear this rustling behind you, you could do one of two things. You could assume it's something, and even if you're wrong, that's a false positive, but you'd better be safe than sorry. So you turn around, what is that? Right? False positive, but you reacted to it. But if you assume it's nothing, and it actually is something, it is a tiger, but you assume it's nothing, or it's just the wind. That's a false negative, but you don't react to it, right? Then you're lunch. There's an immediate danger to false negatives because there's something that you really need to look out for. We understand that immediate danger. The question that we want to consider tonight is there a danger to false positives? Is there a danger to thinking it's something and so you react, but it's really nothing? And I would suggest there's really no danger in false positives if all you do is check to see, hey, was that something? Oh, no, and move on. But the danger in false positives is when you begin to not just say, oh, that must be something, but then attempt to give that something a life of its own. You turn your false positive into a false positive with an entire backstory, an entire narrative. Like he said, you give it intentions, you give it goals and purposes, you give it attributes, agency, and now your false positive takes on a life of its own. And then you build a cult and a culture around this false positive, and you create a tradition around it, and then you pass that tradition on to your offspring, and you now have an entire culture living with a false positive. That could be the danger. And so I think it's worth considering, how does this play into not just religion overall, but each of us. I know for me, I made sense of my life by responding to this false positive. We're here. We must have got here somehow. I think that's a valid statement. How did we get here? I think that's a valid question. You begin looking for agency. You hear stories about the agent. You adopt these stories. It begins to feed your own imagination, but it helped me make sense of my life. It helped me make sense of my moments. How do I connect the dots between my birth, my childhood, the passions that beat within me, my future, my goals, my afterlife? This false positive gave me it connected the dots and gave meaning to my life. When I realized it was a false positive and named it as such, there was a period of lamenting what I lost by way of that meta-narrative, that backstory. And so I guess to throw it to you guys, I would ask, what did you do? Or did you have a moment when you realized, okay, if not that, then what? That did such a good or at least functional job of giving me a story. And in story, we find reason. I have a guy who I went to seminary with, and he told me the reason why he believes is because without this belief, even if it be a false positive, he can't think of a meaning for life. And so this kind of goes back to something I asked you guys in one of the first episodes, but in light of what we're talking about now. There are other questions I want to ask, but first I just want you to speak to, did you have a sense of meta-narrative lost once you were able to name your belief in the Bible's God as a false positive? And what was that like for you? There are other questions I want to get to, but if you can just answer that one to get us started.
Jay, what did you want to take this first? I'm curious.
No, why are you trying to pass it off to me? Sounds like you're trying to get your thoughts together or something.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll take it. Yeah, I didn't immediately. I think the feeling was an overwhelming. I hate to give this fodder to the theist out there, but it was just a relief, honestly, to get the easy burden. Using the Lord Jesus's words, he says, "My burden is easy," right? My yoke is easy and my burden is light is actually the words. And so I felt the weight of whatever this easy yoke and light burden. I felt the weight of that off of my shoulders. Felt so amazing. I wasn't necessarily looking to replace it with anything else immediately. And I haven't looked very hard to try to replace it with anything. So, yeah, I just,
But while you were under the auspices of this belief, did it? I mean, we spoke about this before, and you're alluding to it now. The burden of having to bear this story with all the holes and plot holes and moral issues and scientific issues, whatever it was, it at least was a story that told your life what your trajectory was. At least you were looking forward to heaven and a relationship with this God, and you had this idea of why we were here, this war between God and man because man had rebelled. It gave you a story. So yeah, once that was lifted, I can relate to having that lifted. You don't have to tell that story anymore and fix its plot holes anymore. But I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, while you were under it, didn't it stitch life together for you in some way?
while I was under it, I was a victim and I was experiencing what every believer experiences, which is what you call Stockholm syndrome.
Okay.
I believe most Christians, I mean, for those, would you rather define, I should pass that off to Albert. Albert, would you like to define Stockholm syndrome for our audience so that they understand what we're talking about here?
My definition, it's when the victim of when you're held hostage and the victim itself begins to empathize with the perpetrator, or I should say even sympathize or side with momentarily, at least. Yeah. I don't know if that's a good definition, but
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a workable definition for what I'm basically saying is you start having positive feelings, so to speak,
Right.
or something along those lines toward the and so no matter how. Now remember, it's important to recognize the victim or the abusive situation, which is what religion really is. I mean, particularly Christianity. We talked about the psychological. And in fact, there was someone who jumped in the comments on YouTube who was just like, I don't mind having to navel gaze when I'm thinking about self-analysis, and he of course applied it to the most innocuous kinds of things in life, which is being a good husband and a good father. We're not arguing about that. We're talking about the kind of psychological damage that's done when you're sitting around second guessing just regular human emotions, etc.
Wow. Well, what's crazy is I'm thinking of ways to justify, not because I'm still suffering from Stockholm syndrome, but just to have this conversation, to justify the one that you're saying basically was holding you hostage. But it's like you went to him for salvation. How was he holding you hostage? But even as I'm saying that, I'm like, well, you went to him for salvation from a situation that he put you in the first place.
He manipulated you. I mean,
no, even before you get to he manipulated you. The reason why you're a quote unquote sinner in need of salvation is because he knit you together in your mother's womb in a sinful condition. So it's like the person who says, my kidnapper, he applied pressure on my wound and stopped me from bleeding until the paramedics came in. But he shot you. Like you're thanking him for saving you, but he put you in the danger that you're in.
Right.
So I'm trying to think about this for the person who wants to say, how are you trying to blame God for holding you hostage when at some point in your life you clung to him as savior? But savior from what?
They say he's utilizing all of this to show us his own glory and greatness.
To the praise of his glory.
But I mean, that's why I use the word manipulation, because it's like, he's just kind of created a whole situation that's utterly unnecessary, and all kinds of human suffering. Now, of course, people say, well, you're assuming okay, whatever. I'm not going to even deal with it. And you can't deal with all of the potential interlocutors, because there's always going to be somebody who says something absurd. But needless to say, he's convinced you that the only way that you could be saved is to be in this relationship, and basically this is just like an abusive relationship, because the very person that you're being said, he's like, I love you, I'm is the same person that will burn you for eternity if you don't believe in him. So it's like, this is literally like the guy who beats his kid or beats his wife and then makes love to her and she's just confused. And so I think the best analogy I could give for it is Stockholm syndrome. So,
Gotcha.
Needless to say, not without going too far down that, because
no, it's all good. I think that's probably going to help somebody, so it was worth having that conversation. So go ahead.
Yeah, but basically, when one is freed from that and they realize that they were being manipulated psychologically, etc. So it's one thing that when you first get free from it, you might be angry or whatever, but when you actually realize the freedom that you're now living in, you stand fast in the liberty with Christ has not made you free, right? Once you start standing fast in that liberty, you start looking back on your previous self, and you realize that you had Stockholm syndrome, and it feels good to not, and you're not immediately in search of a surrogate for it.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Al.
Yeah.
Same question, but I guess in light of what he said, were you 100% on the same boat, or did you have any of what I'm talking about in terms of this postpartum depression, as it were?
A little bit, but it wasn't as pronounced as actually kind of my excitement a little bit too.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think it was a great relief to me. Um, it was, I think the relief came because I just found a way to explain things more simply.
More parsimoniously.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Mm.
And that was kind of a big weight because for much of my 20s, apologetics was a big deal to me and defending the faith, and I didn't have to run those, endless circles and mental gymnastics anymore. I didn't have to, just pour over arguments and texts and things like that to, constantly think about like, well, if, trying to find consistency in a worldview and etc. So I think in that sense it was kind of I felt really relieved, and it did help though. I've mentioned this before in another episode because I had gone to grad school right after my kind of, or right around my deconversion. I had a whole new kind of community to kind of have make new friends, and so it was a little bit of a unique situation, and I was able to kind of latch on to them and in a way, and not think too much about the community that I lost too much, even though I kept in touch, but yeah, it was a little different, and Stockholm syndrome is an interesting way to put it. I never thought to have put it the way that you did, Jaywitt, in that way. I think for me, what was also really helpful was dropping kind of that meta narrative in general, and also being able to I don't know how to really describe it, but not having to be obligated to attend the church community and really do all the things that kind of they may require, or that I thought I was required to do as a Christian, things like that. That was also another point. It's another huge relief to me. So, I just that to me that was kind of drilled in my head for a long time as a believer. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I can definitely relate to that relief and that excitement of I don't have to carry that meta narrative anymore. I'm free from that. But before I got to that point, I personally had several years of depression. And you guys can feel free to speak to this however you're led. But because for so long the Bible's story was the story of, it was my worldview, it was how I saw everything. It was the reason why I did everything that I did. From when I was a rapper to when I was writing books to when I started teaching. I put together a whole curriculum. It was teaching in community college and high schools. I designed this whole curriculum in secular education just to drum up the questions in the minds of my students. I would talk sociology, I would talk philosophy, just to get them to ask questions that would allow me to smuggle in theological answers. I would teach for 10 months just to get one student to ask the right question that would allow me to share the gospel in a secular setting. So everything that I did was toward that end. Once I saw that worldview was crumbling, I was depressed because I would wake up in the morning and I didn't have a reason to put my foot on the floor. Get out of bed for what? And so I just remember feeling that, and this was years before I actually put the flag in the ground and deconverted. This was just when I knew that was the end of I knew that was coming. I wasn't ready to face it. And then once I did face it, I think there was that excitement that, okay, it's not that. There must be something else. And whatever the something else is, it's got to make more sense than that. Because that didn't, now when I think about it, didn't make a lot of sense anyway. But anyway, I just say that to say, so I did have that period of, you know, man, if not that, then what? And I was kind of distraught. And I can empathize with people right now, people who are asking me, okay, if not that, then what? And so you guys can speak to any of that I just said, or you can simply answer this question that I'm posing to you. What do you tell yourself now, then? If not that, if that's not what life is, if that's not what our reality is about, if that's not what's happening, if that's not where meaning is found, what do you tell yourself is going on in our world? What do you tell yourself about our reality? Do you have the inklings of a meta-narrative? And I'll include in this very long question, do you have your own myth, a new myth that you tell yourself about how your days string together into a meaningful life?
I can lead with this, because I think the basic answer to your question about do I have a myth or a new narrative, I would say no, I don't.
Jay Witt's reacting over there. I'm curious what you're thinking.
What are you thinking?
Well, given your stance on what you think of, the possibility of a God or whatever, I'd imagine, I think you'd be full of hope. You of all men should not be most miserable.
So hold on, Jay Witt, you're referring to a conversation that you and Albert have had that I'm not privy to, and we've never talked about that on this podcast. Maybe it's worth pausing to just ask the question right now. So you gave
Albert's
up on the Christian mythos,
Let's just say that.
The Christian God.
Albert's,
Albert, have you? I'm talking about Albert. Albert, have you given up on God altogether? Are you an atheist? And you don't even have to answer that if you don't want to. But can you include your answer to that in your answer to the very long question that I just asked?
Sure. So to be honest, I don't think too much about what I call myself in those regards. I guess that agnostic is probably the best description that, but it's not something that I, once again, I haven't really drawn a lot of boundaries and clear lines around what I think it means for me and things like, or how I fit into the historical definition of the word or the label. But
right, because there are two kinds of agnostics, right? One is, I don't know. The other is, you don't think it can be known.
Right.
If there's a supernatural, the natural wouldn't have any kind of. And are you saying you haven't put yourself in either one of those categories? Or?
I'd really, because I hadn't. To me, it doesn't. It's not an important question to me in a way.
Frying pan into the frying pan here.
Audience expect to see analogies just kind of flow out of Jay Witt's mouth as we continue to talk on this subject. But no, so I and the reason why I feel like I'm not too interested in that is because I don't really believe in meta-narrative at all. I don't think that. Yeah. I think that's a very, it stems from our kind of ancient past and this, pre-modern sense of, and I would say even anti-modern in a way, but I think the postmodernists in one sense had it right when they totally deconstructed any veracity of having a meaningful meta-narrative. Because I think the world is really complex, right? And so my general approach or philosophy has been not to think in my worldview in those types at all, but I do probably gravitate a little bit towards, some Buddhist concepts of things, when they talk about the emptiness of the world and how truths can be transcended from itself in a way. So I don't think that very interesting. I read an article by Danella Meadows. She's a professor at Harvard. This was in grad school, and she wrote a very interesting thesis paper about basically how to implement change in a system. Like, what are the most effective ways to implement change? And she has like a 10-point list, and as you go through it, they're very good points, but the top point that she makes is basically having the power to transcend any system. So and I think that's an interesting conversation when we talk about ideologies and things like that, because so much of our political discourse and religious discourse is about truths and paradigms and how things fit so neatly in consistent models, and then what do you do when the models break down and things like that. So I think it's really important to kind of believe that we need to not really see systems as truths as per se, but that they are, that they can be transient and you can transcend those things. So how that applies to a broader philosophy of life and things like that, I haven't done that work. But
some evangelical is thinking you're trying to be like God. You're trying to be the transcendent. Say you want to transcend those things. Only God is the one. God is the only one who cannot be categorized.
This man works in code, and he's denouncing binary thinking.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's interesting to know when you study, for example, mathematics, right? The Gödel's, what was his Incompleteness Theorem, right? When you talk about even the axiomatic claims in mathematics, like, you can't actually prove them. And that it's a very weird problem, I think, when you consider that there are mysteries in the world. I can totally talk about that and think that it's totally valid to come up with categories and ways to talk about it. But this ability to transcend, obviously it's not what you think, right? Don't take that word too literally. We're just talking about how there are unexplainable things in the world, and I think the scientists, philosophers, and physicists, I think they do a great job talking about those things already, and that's what I'm more interested in, I think, at the end of the day.
So one more question. Let me push you to defend your worldview, if you would defend it, or at least explore it, at the edge of an apologist's sword. So let's put this back in the context of, that ancient being assuming, these false positives. I hear a rustling. I turn to see what it is, because it just could be something that I need to pay attention to. When you say, you kind of even reject the idea of metanarratives, would someone be right in saying, so basically you're living your life as if your life itself is a false positive? As if the idea of you, Albert, having meaning, having purpose, having destiny, is it's not a thing that you really need to pay attention to? Are you not treating your life like a false positive?
That's a good question. I think my approach to that issue is more about, like, I don't see it as a problem in my point of view. I see it more as, I'm just here. I already have an interest in so many things about the topics that I think about, or that we've discussed some of it on this podcast, and the work that I do, I think deeply about, and things like that. So I don't know, those things already arrest my fascination with the world and things like that. So I don't really think about like that I need to have this kind of like, right? Like an answer to those questions in order to make my life meaningful. To me, it's already meaningful already because I'm already,
Yeah.
engaging with the things that I'm interested in. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
hear, I've never heard anybody answer it that way actually. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a weird way to
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
I'm tapping back into the mind I had as a Christian apologist who was trying to always create a need in someone so that I could use God to fill that need.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I
And I
like
think
that
it's
connection.
powerful for you to say, I don't have that need. Like
Right.
everything that I'm saying, because I could also see the apologist saying, oh, so what really is happening is you're treating God as a false negative. You think it's nothing there when there really is something that you
Right.
need to pay attention to.
Right. Right.
Um, there's all these angles that the apologist or even the evangelist is trying to come at to create a hole in you so that they can use their God to fill that hole.
Right.
So yeah, props to you for just saying no, that void's filled already. Like I've got too much going on to try to let you
Right.
drill another cavity in me that just so you can fill it with your God.
Right.
Jay Witt, same question. If do you have a need for narrative, for meta narrative, and if so, do you allow yourself to have one?
Yeah, having been duped once, I have resolved not to be duped again.
Mm-hmm.
So I've taken great measures to protect the freedom. Having come on here. We gotta go to Galatians. Who has bewitched you, brother? Having left, you gonna get pulled back into this nonsense. And I honestly feel like passages like 1 Corinthians was at 120 where he talks about where the debater and the scholar is. Hasn't God made foolish the wisdom of the
Otherwise,
wise?
right.
Like if you don't present them with, the irony is if I don't present you with a certain kind of wisdom or debate, then you don't have anything that you can't. The saying goes, you can't. My father used to say a lot that if you let a person who's trying to be argumentative leave them alone, they'll eventually just shut up because they can't argue by themselves. And there's a sense in which the answer to this is like, well, if I don't present, like kind of what Al was saying, if I don't present you with this worked out philosophy or debate
Right.
or wisdom, some narrative, you don't have anything to debate with. The only thing you can say is present me with the presuppositionalist trope where it's say, well, you can't live, man. You can't live that way. It's like that's the consistent. Well, you can't live consistently. What he says, you can't account, as Bonson used to always say. You
Right.
can't account for your counting, or you have to. It's just like, which is just the silly. Yeah, okay, it's a turn on a word, so to speak, but if you go to bed feeling very satisfied with yourself because you think you've trumped me because I can't account for my counting, then go feel satisfied. I'm not going to sit here and debate with you. I mean, personally, I just don't see the point.
So
And
what you're saying that you don't have a need to account for your counting? Counting is good enough for you.
yeah, I mean, I like Albert was speaking when you talk about axioms, and this is the crux of presuppositionalism, is that at the core of any worldview is axiomatic kind of propositions and understanding of the way things are, and that's true of everybody. It's just for them, they say, well, we well, that axiom needs to be, it needs to have the foundation of God underneath of it.
Right.
But then this is an infinite regress if you actually think about it, because where is his grounding? I mean, you can go back and they say, well, he doesn't need that because but then it starts falling apart. It's because you end up creating a character or a being or an ontology or however you want to put it, where it defies any kind of reasoning, and then that's what you count your reasoning in. Like You say, oh, well, he's eternal, and he doesn't have a beginning. He's a he, but he's not really a he the way you know a he to be. He's seated in heaven, but he's omnipresent. So all kinds of paradoxes, as they like to speak of them, or what we call in common language contradictions. And then you base that's the basis for your axioms. It's like, all right, well, I'm not appealing. I don't have an invisible contradictory being to base my axioms in. It suffices for me to say 1 + 1 is 2, and that's just true. For me, that's where it's a good place to start. Why? Well, it beats its alternative, not being able to make sense of the world. All right, like adopting your God and all the contradictions that comes along with. That doesn't make sense of the world. So in some sense, it's a lesser of two evils philosophy about the way you live your life, if you boil it down to that. It's like, all right.
So it sort of sounds like pragmatism.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of pragmatism, but I don't want to marry myself to any very specific philosophical worldview. I'm just saying, yeah, at the end of the day, it's pick your poison on some level. It's and this is not really a poison, because it's like, is it really a poison if it makes sense and it works in the world? Not really. And this is like, if this is where I have to start, if I have to start by saying that the law of non-contradiction is a thing, and that's just where we have to begin, and it makes sense, and we can make planes fly, and we can have podcasts, and we can do coding and stuff, then all right, let's just go ahead. But that doesn't need the inconsistent God of the Bible to undergird it for it to make sense. And it doesn't need me to make up some sort of other myth to make sense of it. It's more or less self-sufficient, it does not require, these sorts of, and this is why I'm basically, as I've said to you on numerous occasions, I'm an ecumenical unbeliever or atheist. All forms, any, form of, I was thinking about it, and the fact that you can't really, it's almost like, because of the lowly origin of even the term God, you kind of can't get away from one of the best ways I've heard, I think it was Richard Dawkins who was saying how, like, when people apparently have alien sightings, when they say they have seen an alien, the problem, the thing they always get wrong is they almost always have traits that look like they have a common ancestor with human beings. And what the thing that he's pointing to is that there's no reason to think that if life evolved on another distant planet, that it should in any way have, eyes on its head the way we, there. I mean, it very well may be the case, but the reason why life is set up, the reason why you can look at a dog and see it's a relative of a human being, if you look at its paws, or even if you just look at a fish, you look at the fins, and you can kind of see our relation to these other creatures, is because we share a common ancestor. And if we're coming into contact with alien life, why would it necessarily look kind of like us? That just shows the limit. And the reason why I'm saying this is the limitation. It's almost like we can't envision something outside. It's going to be necessarily anthropomorphic because of just where we're coming from. And that's just the concept of God, like the word God itself and what it carries with it, is just basically anthropomorphic in such a way that, like, I just don't find it to be a useful word. And that's why I just, I'm an ecumenical atheist or whatever. I just don't, the word itself carries the same sort of anthropomorphism that the person who says they saw an alien with a big human head, essentially, with oversized human eyes, anyway.
So Jay, you're saying that you don't accept the Spinoza and Einstein definition of God, right? You don't think that that's even a valid definition?
For me, it suffices to just talk about nature and the laws of the universe and the natural world as we know it. I don't think I need to employ the language of God because it carries along with it this necessary anthropomorphism that I just can't, and anthropopathism, like, these emotions that they attribute to, it's like you're almost assuming from the door, and unfortunately, it's almost always spoken of monotheistically too. So it's like basically what they're often proposing is basically the Christian God. You know, it's like essentially, you know, it's not. It's usually not. They're not thinking of a pantheon. They're not thinking of. You know, they're basically proposing that you believe in something like a glorified human being, essentially, just like these aliens. It's like, that's why I'm just as skeptical of the alien sightings, is because they carry the imprint of anthropomorphism.
Right. Just like you said, the inability to imagine something that you've never seen before, something that is truly alien, truly foreign. The inability to do that sort of speaks to uh, the like you said, the human origin, or just um, the source of the thing that was created. But somebody could say, but we weren't made in the image of aliens, we're made in the image of God, and therefore there would be some similarities between us and God. So that's kind of what somebody might say to that. But I want to kind of get back closer to what we were actually doing. Like once you dispatch this idea of God, are you saying, and therefore meta-narrative goes with this God? Is that why you don't need one or you don't seek one?
Okay, this is easy to answer. It's like, you know, when you take out the trash, do you go looking for new trash? No.
No,
No.
but you instinctively or naturally create more trash. That's just what you do.
Yeah,
You're going to have more trash next week.
unfortunately.
So have you
But
not created more trash? Is what I'm asking.
no, I mean, trash, a lot of the trash in my particular house is the result of the trash that I'm most eager to get rid of is the refuse of meals. So it doesn't start off as trash. It starts off as something useful, but then I just end up with refuse.
Well,
That ends
but
up
here's the thing. If I can make the analogy live, so in the course of my having deconverted, if I'm honest, at times, and you guys can speak to this or call me crazy if you like, or laugh at it, I don't care. At times, I do tell myself certain myths. I do tell myself, I say, man, I wonder if, like, what if? What if this is what's really going on planet Earth? Like, what if this is what we're going to find when we die? I say certain things just to kind of stitch it together because I don't like not having a meta narrative. And I might throw that trash out at the end of the day. Like, of course, that's silly. Or I've got no way to verify that. There's no reason for me to think that. But I still create that trash. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think this is why when I stopped reading the Bible, I said, okay, this doesn't mean you stop reading. You start reading real history. It's like you were reading fake history. Okay, now let's get into real history. Let's study my ethnic group or whatever. Let's start looking into things and seeing what it's like. What do you replace junk philosophy, which is what the Bible gives you? What do you replace it with? Real philosophy. You know, like these questions, they are
But we
being
don't
dealt
know the
with.
origin of the universe, and so there's
No,
really
we,
nothing to replace it with that's
no,
real.
no, but there are people thinking about things like the anthropic principle, and there are high-level discussions going on about those. That's a good place. If I'm going to sit around and use brain power, this is not. I don't encourage other people to necessarily do this, but if you're going to do this, there are good places to. There are places. It's like I don't need to go create a. There's a tendency with each successive generation for people to think that they are and this is incidentally, this is why in the Christian cult there's we who are alive, this is what Paul says, will be caught up, was it at First Thessalonians or whatever, where he's talking about there's a tendency for Christians in each generation to I think it's First Thessalonians 4:15, where he talks about what people refer to, some Pentecostals and so forth will refer to as the rapture, the catching up of us into heaven, and when to meet Christ in the cloud. There's a tendency each generation to think I would like to be that person, this is a bit of a trail, but basically to say, don't if anything, you don't have to assume that you're beginning or kicking off an important conversation or anything in regards to this. There are plenty of people who have thought about a lot of these things, and you could use that as a launching point to think further and to maybe try to. But the idea, that God has placed eternity in our hearts and that kind of thing. This is the kind of thing that is self-serving for Christians, and maybe it does speak to some sort of. I just think that creatures that get past the basics of life, like how to provide themselves with food and water and sufficient shelter, and to have enough leisure on your hands to start thinking existentially, you will occasionally have these thoughts. But one of the remedies for this is to just be busy doing things. I think, honestly, to just.
I mean, you look at orangutans in captivity where they're fed and they have shelter. They don't have to spend their time pursuing the basic levels of Maslow's hierarchy. Yet they don't come up with, as far as we know, metanarratives in religion.
Yeah, but I'm speaking specifically of human beings because of the way our brains have developed, the level of intelligence we have. This is why also
the ability to think about our thinking. Yeah,
and it's also why you don't have suicide often among people who are just suicide it's almost like an affliction primarily of people who are usually in societies where they're not just going out and hunting regularly and because there's a sense in which the daily task of just providing for oneself it actually distracts you sufficiently to keep you away from some of these the existential dread and so forth. The leisure that you're afforded when you get beyond this, and it would be interesting to see the connection between the development of religion and agrarian societies. When people learn to farm and to have food that was in abundance and even surplus, then maybe religions got more developed. I'm guessing these things went hand in hand. If you're going out with 10 other brothers and you're running to hunt some food, antelope or something, you're just too busy with the task at hand. And that's one of the ways that I've avoided having to spend these
but somebody could say you're basically they would almost use your same words against you and say, oh, the reason why God doesn't enter your thoughts is because you're keeping yourself too busy. You're basically distracting yourself from the ultimate questions in life.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds very subjective. Ultimate question. I mean, go ahead, Albert. What do you say?
No, you can argue that that's actually kind of the default state of every person. You know what I mean? It's not so much a distraction as more that it describes how humans are. I not to get too technical, but I think Heidegger has an interesting view on how he views how we are kind of thrown into existence. And his whole thing is that before we even question anything, we instinctively know how to use things, which is kind of an interesting assessment. And then you go through life without really kind of questioning until when you start to question your reality and things like that, that's when the anxiety potentially can happen in your life, and you start to really have a sense of fear, anxiety, and dread and things like that. And then he goes on to describe how that's how you create meaning in your life, right? When you try to create that false positive, like you said. So that's another way to bring that tie into this. But yeah, I think what Jay Witt's talking about is just very real. It's just very that's a matter of fact about everybody is busy. Everybody's trying to make a living. Everybody's people are going to school. People are trying to. We're caught up in the practicalities of the daily life, and it's not until we become the philosopher in our own way, right? That's when we start to ask these big questions. So I don't know if that's helpful, but
not Jay Witt, Albert. I saw when I started talking about the daily myths that I create and maybe throw away at the end of the day or whatever. You kind of reacted and laughed like maybe you knew a little bit what that was about. Can you relate to any of that?
Yeah, totally. I could, I can't. I probably do that unconsciously as well, here and there. I remember, sometimes I think about how, I don't know, so I like weird metaphysical things would pop in my head here and there. Like what if we do live in this strange world with these multi-realities that, that physicists talk about and, stuff like that. Yeah. So I get those moments where I'm asking those big questions, but I don't know the answer to them. We don't know the answer to those questions. So those get thrown out. But even just like the daily stuff about like, like, why am I doing this? Like, what like, what's the ultimate goal of like doing X, Y, and Z right now? It's like I'm not even enjoying it, so that starts to, help me reflect on certain things from a practicality and just understanding like what you find to be a fulfilling life or is worth your time or worth.
Yeah, that brings to mind a friend of mine who was a musician, and he at one point he used to practice so much on his instrument, and I remember he said he stood in front of his music collection at the time. It was a bunch of CDs, and he said, "Do I even like any of this stuff?" It's like real. It's like, do I even like? It's like he started questioning. It got all meta for him. He's like. I'm working on all of this stuff. I'm working all this stuff out in my bag, but do I actually even like the music? Is it become just this like thing that? But he was so busy with the task, he never even stopped to think, do I actually like? And it was just a real question, I don't know.
So I think that ties into part of where I go in terms of, okay, so I give up on the Bible as meta-narrative and religion and God and all that. I do find myself going more towards existentialism. I know that I'm here now. That's what I know. That's what I can validate. That's what I have to respond to. Hedonism. I want to enjoy. I have brain cells. I have nerve endings. I have taste buds. I can enjoy life. Let me give the parts of me that can know joy. Let me give those things something to enjoy. And I think fighting to stave off nihilism, because once you go into existentialism, that is, for a lot of people, that's the other side of the coin. And I think there's that daily fight to fight off nihilism. But that's sort of where I land. But then I do, like I said, engage in that myth making. But like you said, Jay Witt, in my myth making, I try to incorporate, but what do we know about the world now? I always tell people, if the ancients who gave us the religions, the revealed religions of the world, if they were able to look through the telescope and the microscope like we can today, I don't think it's that they would not have told myths. I think they would have just told different myths. They would have told myths that include the things that can be known about the world in their day and age. Because they still had the motivations that they were trying to accomplish, which was to motivate a society of people to live a certain way, to live with regard to certain hopes and fears, and encourage armies to fight knowing that a God was on their side. All these reasons they had to promote their religion. So I don't know if they would have not told myths, but I think they would have told different myths. So now I think about, okay, in light of what we do know, what kind of myths would we tell? And there's one particular that I've grown very fond of. If you're not familiar with, I love for our channel to introduce this channel. He's known to most, probably most atheists, some Christians, but the channel Dark Matter 2525 on YouTube. This guy has been for almost 2 decades now. He has been animating he's been animating a series where he has a God character trying to run a world, and the God character is always being critiqued by this little angelic baby.
Cherub. It's like a cherub.
It's like a cherub named Jeffrey. But the God is doing all these just things that are just like, wait, no God would do that. But then they always flash the verses on the screen where Oh wait, that's a verse from the Bible. The God of the Bible did that. But then they kind of they put the screws of logic to it, of the screws of counter apologetics to this God. Um, and so I want to take a look at this God, but then I also want to take a look at the origin story of this God. This will be the God's graduation ceremony. And here's the setup. Um, the God of this universe is Yahweh. Yahweh Jehovah is his name. On the screen right there is Jeffrey, the cherub slash baby angel, who advises Yahweh and annoys Yahweh because he's always trying to like tell Yahweh that's not going to work. So Yahweh graduated from God's school, and at his graduation, Yahweh has written something extra on his diploma that the dean is like, no, you're not the God of all that. We didn't train you in that. And Yahweh's like, well, that's what I want to be. So now Yahweh gets sent to the principal's office to hash out whether he can be the God of everything. And here goes the discussion in the principal's office.
No, I don't want to hear it. Go to Principal Sagan's office right now.
Come on, Jeffrey, we better go with him.
Principal Sagan is Carl Sagan.
That's what you want me to put on your application? Everything?
Yeah.
Look, Osiris has the underworld, Haturu has the wind, hell, even the Dahako sisters got their hands full being the goddesses of corn, beans, squash. You can't be the god of everything. It would be a logistical nightmare.
Don't worry. I have a plan.
By the way, I notice you have an echo voice, and I don't recall you filling out a reverb form 23B. Next time follow the proper channels. Got it?
Yeah.
Yahweh, I'll put you down for everything. So, God of everything, what powers will you be applying for today?
All of them.
Omnipotence? Look, that's highly overrated. It's like playing a video game with all the cheat codes turned on. It's fun at first, but it gets boring fast. Do you plan on having any arch enemies?
Yeah, Lucifer over here, aka the devil, is going to apply to be my chief rival.
See, the devil is going to have absolutely no desire or reason to oppose an all-powerful opponent that she cannot possibly defeat, unless you're going to make an exception for her.
No, of course not. Also, I'd like to know everything and be everywhere all at once, please.
Wait, let me get this straight. You want to have omniscience with a side of omnipresence on top of omnipotence?
Yeah, so?
Look, what reason would the devil have to even attempt to oppose you? You'd know Lucifer's plans before she does. Hell, thanks to your omnipresence, you'd even be there next to her as she drew up these plans against you. You know the outcome of the plan before anything was attempted. You know every possible scenario and every possible outcome and exactly what to do to stop her.
Yeah, playing fair isn't really my strong suit. Try to keep this on the down low, but we plan on doing the whole good cop, bad cop thing.
I see. Look, you do realize that you're going to be held accountable for everything, right?
How so?
Well, you'll know everything that has ever happened and ever will happen. You'll have the power to do whatever you want to about it, and you'll be everywhere all at once. It would take absolutely no effort on your part to prevent an abundance of unnecessary tragedies, evil, suffering. So if you allow that to happen, you can be blamed.
Not only will they happen, but they'll be a part of my plan.
Oh, so you're an evil god, and the devil's going to be like the anti-hero or something. So you're bad cop, and she's good cop. I gotcha.
No. I'm also applying for omnibenevolence.
You can't apply for omnibenevolence if your plan requires evil, but I'll attach a paradox form 2525, and we'll see what happens. Look, also, if you wouldn't mind, please fill out your plan on this form and check the box marked predetermination.
No predetermination. I want everyone to have free will.
Okay, for that you're going to have to beat me in a game of chess, but your chess pieces are going to have free will. Got it?
Got it.
Got a strategy for how to win?
Oh yeah, I'm good at chess.
You have a plan then.
Yep.
Okay, your move. And I'm giving your chess pieces free will in 3, 2, 1. Checkmate. Look, I'll attach another paradox form 2525 until we get it straightened out. So, you want omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, omnibenevolence, an evil archenemy, a grand plan, and free will for everyone. Anything else?
I'd like to be spaceless and timeless.
Why, may I ask?
Because I prefer to remain beyond human discovery.
Ah, so you want to remain hidden.
No, I'm definitely going to interact with my creation.
Okay, then you can't be spaceless and timeless. If you're omnipresent, then you're everywhere, which includes within space and time, right?
Well, yeah, I guess.
And if you're spaceless, i.e. without substance, and timeless, i.e. cannot act, then how is this any different than total non-existence?
I don't know.
Oh, what a mess.
All right. So I don't know if I'll play all that, but as you can just see, what Dark Matter 2525 does here is he works out how, okay, the biblical mythos cannot be the mythos that we're going to go by. This just it doesn't add up here. This God cannot really be the creator of the universe and have all these attributes and all these things. But what he does is he's done, I mean, hundreds of these episodes with this God and this Jeffrey character. So what he does is he comes up with a meta-narrative that would explain how a God like this could even exist. And so his meta-narrative goes a completely different way with it. And the only reason why I'm playing this is because I want to showcase myth making the way that Dark Matter 2525 has done it here. So play one more clip. This will be a lot shorter.
Let there be light.
Yahweh! Wake up, Yahweh! It's time for school, son.
I don't feel good, Ma.
You know I won't fall for that. Come on, you have final exams today.
Mary, just drag him out of bed if you have to. Now! Or I'm gonna be late for work.
Yes, Joseph.
Get up, boy.
You heard your father.
Okay.
He's not gonna want to get up if you leave the room so damn dark. Open the blinds. Let there be light. Well, look who's decided to finally grace us with his presence.
He's got finals today, honey. Don't be too hard on him.
Typical woman.
All right, you can jump ahead to about 4 minutes and 15 seconds. So Yahweh Jehovah's got final exams today. Let's see what the final exams are.
Our society wasn't always as harmonious as it is today. The complexity and nuance of the reasons are significant. But if I had to sum up why our history was so tumultuous, using the shortest phrase possible, I'd use these two words. Power corrupts. Power corrupts, especially those who seek power and labor to retain it, as opposed to those of whom it is bestowed upon. The critical difference being that power, when sought, produces greed and envy, while power bestowed necessitates responsibility and thoughtfulness. This has been the central challenge that each stage of society's evolution has labored to overcome. What is the best way to distribute power? Who should have control? Throughout history, we have struggled to answer these questions, nearly destroying ourselves several times, attempting not only to answer them correctly, but at last to understand the questions and why they are perilous to leave unresolved. Your exam today will be a part of that answer. The strong took power first, and their reign was bloody. Then came the clever, with their notions of God. Eventually, that too became a bloody affair. The elders of the early tribes seized power by appealing to the all-powerful, who dwelled in a cave, they claimed, the God Cave. It was off-limits, forbidden to everyone except the elders, who only entered to receive commands from God and to give God the gifts of the people. Of course, only the elders knew the truth, that the cave was empty. It was the elders who were truly giving the divine commands and enjoying the fruits of the tribe's offerings. In return, they offered absolutely nothing except the promise of reward and punishment in an afterlife that would never be. As a result, the elders were the wealthiest, most powerful people of their time. Power led to corruption, and corruption to greed, which made the people's suspicions strong enough to explore the forbidden cave, finding it devoid of God or any supernatural power whatsoever. This was a crisis for the powers that be, who quickly found that without their God construct, they had no power. Hiding God in forbidden places eventually gave way to hiding God in progressively inaccessible places. A mountaintop, the sky, the stars, beyond space and time, allowing people to make whatever claims they wanted, which usually coincided with using the manufactured authority of God to spread their influence. They acted as God's mouthpiece, when in actuality, it was the other way around. Throughout history, we've attempted to put many systems of governance in place. Theocracies, dictatorships, democracies, republics, hybrids, etc. These systems, each in their own way, were all destined to suffer from the same fatal flaw. Power corrupts. That's why you're here today. This test is society's attempt to determine who should have power and who should not. Because we are the most successful, peaceful society in history, I think it's a pretty good system. Your final exam will help determine what role you will play in society. We need to know how power will affect you. Will you allow power to corrupt you, as it has so many others? Or will you be one of the few who will overcome temptation and genuinely accept your power as a paramount responsibility to adjudicate with fairness and wisdom? To determine this, you will be given ultimate power of a simulated universe. This is your final exam. All of your current memories will be temporarily removed and backed up on the school's hard drives. You will be inserted into the simulation with the belief that you are God, that you created the universe, that you know everything, and that you're all powerful. The time in your simulation will be compressed to help accomplish your goals. What will feel like thousands of years in the simulation will actually amount to mere minutes in the real world, so you will have all the time necessary to establish your nature as a deity. Will you be benevolent, striving to assist and harmonize with the...
So Yahweh's test that day was to be benevolent and harmonize and to demonstrate that he could be trusted with power, or fail and prove that he cannot. And all of the other Dark Matter 2525 episodes show you Yahweh, which is the other, the character that we saw, as God, wielding this extreme power and knowledge and omnipresence and all that, but doing a terrible job with it. But using the Bible itself to demonstrate how Yahweh does with his power. I want to get reactions from you guys on that, but I wanted to show that just to kind of demonstrate, even deconverting, people, former Christians, have tried to make sense of why was the God myth so powerful? Why did we need it? How could such a thing have ever, been attractive? But then you saw him using technology, this idea of a simulation and all these things, to kind of come up with a new myth on what could really be going on in our world. And I just think those kind of thought experiments are fun, because other than that, you really do have this sense of, we don't really know why we're here. We don't really know what the meaning is. We don't really know what's going on. And we kind of are left to existentialism. We kind of are left to what our hearts and minds and passions and desires can find to get into. And that's sort of all there is until we begin to make new myths, which I'm interested in seeing, what myths we would create if we had to make new myths today. But do you guys have any thoughts, reactions, comments to any of that?
I think what can't be ignored is the fact that so many of these myths are rooted in social structures, and I think it's the social structures that's the other half of the equation that provides that meaning. that makes any sense. So, when I think about the reasons why I was in it, I think I don't know if I really can answer that actually, because I think it's kind of buried in me and very complicated in a way, but I'm sure it had a lot to do though with finding that community of Christians and taking the questions seriously, even when I was younger. So, but a little bit of a departure, but I have a friend who, just to summarize, like he's like thinking about creating a religion without God, and I was having like a long conversation about him about this, and he said that he was trying to find what it is about religion that keeps people together, and he's trying to replicate that in some secular way. And I was a little, I was skeptical. I told him like, I don't know. I feel like people are there because they actually do feel like they experience a transcendent love, or, there has to be some kind of elevated narrative that everyone kind of has to buy into, that kind of brings them together and feel like they're, of the same, ilk or whatever, in terms of whatever spirituality you ascribe to. But yeah, that's one way to explain it, I think, from my vantage point. So, yeah. A God that loves you, right? That's already a pretty strong narrative.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can replicate that or replace that.
A God that loves you, but then, like we talked about before, people who could be the physical embodiment of that God. So if God wants to love you and hug you, well, God doesn't have arms, so the people have to become the body of that God to hug you. God doesn't have a mouth to speak to you, so the people have to become the mouthpiece of God and the eyes of God to frown on you when you've done wrong. But you get this sense. Think about certain drugs, right? Certain drugs give people the same euphoria that religion gives people, because what they do is they suppress the part of the brain that helps a person distinguish between self and other. And when that part of the brain is suppressed, you feel this sense of cosmic oneness. That's what the hippies were talking about, right? I feel this cosmic oneness with you, with my black friend, my white friend, my dog, the tree. Why? Not because we're one, but because that part of my brain that differentiates has been suppressed. Well, what if religion can initiate the kind of self-talk that actually engages that part of the brain in a very intuitive way, such that when your brain is differentiating between you and the people around you, you've talked to yourself enough to the point where those divisions begin to evaporate, or you get this sense of grandeur from the beyond. You're thinking about a omnibenevolent, omnipresent, omnipowerful. The self-talk can almost do the job of the drug to kind of give you the religious experience. So I don't know. I think there's something to myth making, even in the sense of what our brains do to help us feel the reality of our myths. Jay, with any response to the dark matter approach of making sense of the God myth?
Was it 2 Peter 1 where he was talking about we didn't devise cleverly invented myths or something like that? And honestly, just this whole discussion has made it more distasteful for me, actually. The whole idea of myths. I'm not very interested in them. I feel like, just as you were talking, I was thinking, like, I feel like the myth ends up being like, if you would talk about ruled paper, the lines, a paper with lines on it. The myth is that, and then what's written on the line paper is any number of different things that there are legitimate answers for, but that religion gives you a really bad answer for, where it's like, all right, what should you do with your money? Well, definitely not give it to the church, but the church has that on there, right? It's like, what happens after you die? Well, definitely not whatever they're telling you. How should marriages work? How should you relate to your kids? Should you beat your kids? Spare not the rod. Even though it's illegal in America, for instance, to beat your kid with a rod, people are using, that obviously is a euphemism. They're speaking of just disciplining your kid. And of course, they figure a way to deal with that the way they deal with evolution now. But, they literally were beating their kids, back in the day, So it's like, just go down the list. In other words, I don't know if this is terrifically efficient as an illustration, but you have the rude paper. That's your general myth that God created all this stuff. And then you have all of these categories where they're independent. It's just complex. And they have good answers that are not simple, but it's just all brought together under this one, under the auspices of this God. And this is the reason why you live this way. And it just sounds like a bad way. If I let that go, I think it was for a good reason. I don't really feel like replacing that with another version that maybe takes into account science or whatever. It's like, no, I'm willing to just kind of keep the categories separate and not have to bring them together is basically what I'm thinking. Like, I don't.
So you wouldn't even let science fiction provide you with a myth?
No, I wouldn't need a meta narrative. I think that the whole idea is just wrongheaded. Like, it's just like, I'm fine with just having various narratives and various, that's, what they would call compartmentalizing. I think that that's not so bad. I don't want to eat where I defecate, so to speak. Like, I want to keep certain things separate. Right. You know what I mean?
Well, I'll be honest. One of the myths I tell myself sometimes is what if we're only here, we're only in this world to get to this point of realizing that we didn't need this myth? Like, what if that's part, like, you figured it out and now you go to the next level? Like, this life is just a level of something, and part of leveling up is realizing that you need to just deal with reality as it is instead of creating myths to get you by. But even that is a myth.
I remember D.A. Carson really criticizing, and because when he put out his book, The Gagging of God, he did a lot of talk about postmodernism. And I remember he was doing speeches and he would talk, he'd give his sermons, and he would often mention the story Pulp Fiction as being the ultimate kind of postmodern movie. And he was just saying how he was more or less saying that there wasn't a central theme, and how this kind of represented the way the generation was thinking at the time. That there wasn't a singular kind of meta narrative or story, and that and he was saying that movie more or less, he felt like I think he thought he was being edgy by using Pulp Fiction, which was it was an edgy movie at the time. I think he thought by employing that he could kind of show how this kind of captured the milieu of the era. And I think that, I just find that almost more appealing in some ways. Just because when you look at the complexity of life, you've talked about it. Like, whenever you go out into nature and you see all of the pain and suffering, you see like a praying mantis sucking the brain out of something or whatever. It's just like, why would I want to have everything under one, why can't I just let that be there and then also hold a newborn baby and think that the baby shouldn't experience pain? Those things can coexist. I don't know if I'm doing a good job, but I can take a child to go get cotton candy and enjoy an amusement park ride, but also know that there's a tiger hunting somewhere in the savannah. I just don't really see the point in trying to bring it all together and have a nice bow on top of it and say, okay, it all means this. I think that whole telos, this whole teleological, it's like a lot of people shed God, but they still hold on to the idea that you need a telos. And I just think that, I think that's kind of small-minded.
Thoughts on that, Albert?
Yeah, totally agree. I think, I think any system of thought actually breaks down at some point. I think that's the
Yeah.
the implication here, because when we modeling, the world, right, is there's no one model. There are potentially an infinite number of models, maybe, but I think when we start to see the limitations of how we model the world, and then we start to ask more meaningful questions, I think, in terms of how to approach it and how to think about it holistically. So
I'm betwixt because I hear what you're saying, and Jay Witt, I appreciate what you just said about the idea of having a telos, the whole idea of the teleological model. It all seems so small-minded now. I appreciate that, but at the same time, I cannot deny there's something in me that says, but isn't it just fun to be able to try to figure out and have a telos, and if there is none, then man, it just kind of all. I won't go as far as to say what the theists were saying, like, oh, it just seems like a waste. It just seems like it's all it's trending towards something, and I'd love to be able to tell myself we can know what that is. But I also see how small-minded that is, because we're just one species out of tens of thousands, if not more, that have lived and died on this planet. Like, did dinosaurs know what their purpose was? Like, what makes us think that we should know what no other species knew? And it's like, I think you talk about this a lot, Jay, but there's a narcissism here that says, but we should know. We should be the ones that, but what if we're just the latest in a long line of species on this planet that will not have known anything more than what they could figure out while they were here? And I have to be okay with that.
I've often talked about the narcissism of bad luck, even. Like how narcissistic you have to be to think that you have bad luck. It's
or
like,
even good luck.
Yeah, or even, I mean,
even good
but
luck.
I love saying bad luck just because of, it's like, well, how can that be narcissistic? It's bad luck. It's like, actually, yeah, you think you're that important? Like, do you think you're that important that things are rigged against you? Like, no, that's not how it works,
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I agree with you.
So then last question to you guys. Because what people will see as they watch this is you guys have been deconverted for 10 years, so you're much more comfortable with the things that I'm wrestling to get comfortable with. That whole idea of not needing a telos, and I'm probably playing more devil's advocate than people would, like, they would look and say, man, look, you can see Brady's still struggling. I'm really playing devil's advocate here, but there's a part of me that says, but I get it. And I still do practice this idea of myth making. But having said that, I would ask you guys to speak to this. So you're comfortable, you're fine with not making myths or not having metanarrative and taking life as it comes and all that. To what degree do you think it's important, necessary, worthwhile to disabuse others of the myths that they hold? To call them to the reality that, as far as we know, there is no such thing. Or do you just live and let live, especially when you think of how useful myths have been when it comes to bonding societies together, though at the same time it causes them to war with other societies, causing people to fear the watchful eye of God. And so it almost becomes a check on evil if you have this myth that keeps people in line because God's still watching them when there are no police around, when mommy and daddy aren't home.
Also
if you take that
Inquisition.
Say again.
I said it also caused the Inquisition.
Right. So I'm saying the myths are useful to keep society and keep evil, in a sense, in check. But what do you say to that? Is that not a good enough reason to allow people to keep their myths? Because a podcast like ours may very easily disabuse people of their myths. So what do you say to that?
A very complex question. Religion is you can't deny, like, I'm not sitting there and shouting at the top of my lungs saying like all religion is bad or every form of it is bad and things like that. So I think that's why I can't really have like an answer for it.
Mm-hmm.
So but I can say that there are good outcomes from it. There are extremely terrible outcomes for it, and I sometimes feel like religion in some ways is or I guess you can say like myth building or myth believing it just could in some sense be more tailored to certain people than others. There can be a subjectivity to it, so I sometimes feel that way. I sometimes feel like at the end of the day, because religion has had such a profound impact on my life growing up, but at the end of the day, I'm sitting here many years later and I'm like, I don't think it was actually good for me personally. So
then would you let other people have that false positive, or would you say, I think we, if at all possible, we ought to.
I mean, John Cunningham or Callahan, right, the cartoonist from Portland, right? He attributes AA to helping him coming out of alcoholism. So his sponsor told him it's talked about faith all the time, right? It's like, and I guess that helped him, despite the fact that he's such a vulgar person. Maybe that's something I don't know, but. I don't, right, and then but at the same time, do I agree with the do I think the methodology is beneficial in general and overall? Like, I don't think so. I don't think it's right for people to have an awareness about the kind of power it has over you if you're not being critical and about your doubts and things like that. So I don't know. That's a whole other that's a whole other episode, I would say. Brady, in a sense. So, but it depends on who I'm talking to. Maybe that's another way to say it. It depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to somebody and I know them well, and I feel like I can really go in and question a lot of things, yeah, sure. But other people, I won't. So, yeah.
Jay Witt, I want to turn the question a little bit to ask. Do you think Albert said, looking back, even though he was raised in it, he doesn't think it was particularly healthy for him. Do you see the benefit of allowing people to keep their myths? So this is not just live and let live.
Yeah, that's like, like there's no, I honestly think there's a such thing where there are certain questions there's no real answer to.
Okay.
Because you could start parsing why things, some people say Hitler was a Christian, so that the Holocaust ends up being a Christian Holocaust. And then other people say, well, it's actually because he wasn't a Christian. I mean, you could, and so are people better off if they're restrained by religion or less, or are they better off free, I mean, I don't know. If you look at secular Europe, for instance, you might think that because they tend to do better than us in terms of violent crime and stuff. So you might say, well, maybe religion has had a nefarious influence on us. But is it religion, or is it like there's so many variables? I mean, you can't really say these things in a definitive way unless you put in tests for those variables. So unless you do like an actual scientific study on it, because I'm sure there are so many things contributing. So in other words, I'm just mentioning one example of something people might bring up. But yeah, I mean, I honestly think that you have good people who gravitate toward religion, good people who gravitate toward other things and go in the opposite direction. And I think if you're a pretty nice person, you'll find nice ways and nice expressions within Christianity.
Well, someone would say, no, I was horrible before I gravitated towards religion. I wasn't a good person that adopted a religion.
Yeah, but I'm not speaking about, I'm just talking about my perspective on it. I'm not speaking about what a person would say about it. I'm just saying, I think that people who are psychopaths and all kinds of negativity that you might find from an individual, they might find a religious kind of expression of that, and they will use a religion that someone else might use to spread a lot of good, like to I mean, the same Islam that some people cling to become a suicide bomber, another one clings to do a lot of good and to help and feed homeless people or whatever. And not to go down that whole rabbit trail of discussion, but I'm just thinking, like, it's really not necessarily. I don't see that the problems of the world being solved necessarily through a banishment of religion or the spread of it, so much as I just think people find things to gravitate toward based on their personality that end up extending their personality further. Now, maybe, say for instance, you needed the fortitude or the strength to overcome, like Albert was saying, like some sort of drug addiction or something. Or Michael Brown even spoke about how he did drugs, and more or less it seems like his consistent testimony is that religion helped him to get his life together, yeah, maybe it did. And maybe if he didn't have that religion there, he may have found some other vehicle that he could have used to turn his life around. It's possible, I don't know. I mean, these are the kinds of things. But he's a guy who clearly wanted to clean up his act. It's basically, at the end of the day, I'm like, he found, and religion helped him to clean up his act. Other guys, they end up being Jim Jones with religion. You see what I mean? So it's like, I mean, where are we going with this? It's like, so one guy finds religion and he becomes one of these charlatans who's ripping everybody off, taking their money. And another guy, he just wants to become a scholar and study Hebrew or whatever and stop doing drugs and stop playing drums in a rock band. I mean, like, that's, I'm describing Michael Brown, but it's like, where do you go with that? It's like people, they use, these things are just vehicles that people use to help them get along with their life. So, I don't know. That's how I guess for all of my criticisms of religion, I feel like it could be used to help you get, if you can kind of believe in the mythology, you might be able to use it to help you create a better life for yourself, but that doesn't mean that I don't think you should be told the truth. I mean, I think the truth should be available.
Well, I'm glad you said, because that was the next question was, because if that's the case, then what are we doing? Because this podcast actually has the effect of helping people realize this religion is not for me, or that religion, man-made religion, is not for me.
Well, we're living our truth in some sense. I mean, we're doing what we're putting out into the world something that we think is helpful, and it will be helpful for certain people. For some people, I would say if there's a person who would commit suicide if they found out Christianity was not true, I wouldn't want them to find out that Christianity was not true. I mean, I think that, this is just a quick thought that came to mind just now, but I'm like, am I the hard-nosed atheist that would say, if I would want that person to know, even if I know they're going to go drive themselves off a bridge? No. I like, go ahead, live with your lie. Now, I do understand that in this world and the internet, people might encounter hard truths that might lead them in uncomfortable ways, but this goes along with everything we said earlier about how complex the world is. Everything has some sort of relation to something else, so all you can do is just do what you can and try to be as good a person as you can and help as much as you can. But even doing that, you're going to, you know that there's always going to be some sort of negative outcome, even when you're trying to do as much good as you can.
So this podcast is Icopod. This whole idea of getting away from the mythos of Christianity, seeing the glory fade from it, and so we faded from it. Whether or not we end up seeking a new myth or new meta-narrative, at some point even we recognize, well, for each one of us, and until we find out otherwise, we have to accept the fact that, guess what? The glory is even going to fade from this life. Like, this life is going to be Ichabod at some point. But having to embrace that, it doesn't give the sense of hopelessness that people would think. it actually, for me, has breathed hope into this life so that I stop looking for life to come in the next life and start really looking at this life to make it all that it can possibly be. Um, so that my hope is no longer deferred, it's no longer delayed. My hope is in the here and now. And for the person that says, "Well, that's a dreary thing to hope for because we know this life is going to end," we do, and so we do. What did Paul say? Right? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. That sort of the apostle was right. If there is no resurrection, it changes the way you have to look at life, and so this is part of that reconciling, or at least this is part of recognizing that. Um, and for the person that says, "Well, that's just too bleak for me," uh, no one can force you to look at life that way. But like Jay would said, um, for those who are interested in truth, when he said we're living our truth, we don't think it's just our truth. We think it's the truth. That what the Bible has to say is it does not correspond to reality, and therefore it does not qualify as truth. And so we're doing our best to help ourselves, help one another, help those who are viewing this podcast reckon with these things, and then hit the equal sign to say, okay, well then what does that mean? And so these are the hard conversations that you have to have when you're thinking about what does that mean for me. Um, so yeah, we invite people to join into the comments, to like, to subscribe, to question. You'll see us from time to time chiming in the comments, answering questions when we can. Um, and so yeah, we appreciate everybody who's watching, who's checking this out. Any last words from either of you before we sign off?
It was a good
I'm
combo.
good. I'm good.
Yeah,
Really
I
like the
appreciate.
combo.
Yeah, I appreciate the time and the perspectives. Yeah, there's a lot that we didn't all agree on, but I think we all were able to hear each other and even respect and even kind of like, oh, I can see that. I've been there. I can look at that. So yeah, more of these to come. Thanks for tuning in. Much love, and we'll catch you guys next time.